one of the things as I'm working with couples that I notice is, and there's lots of ways this concept I think has been explored by therapists or authors. And one of the things that I've noticed is probably one of the more popular ways of saying it is probably, oh man, I think it's Gray, Dr. Gray. He talks about like the love languages. And I love the way, actually, again, because I love Sue Johnson, I love the way she talks about it, because she says that essentially our attachment bonds and needs are usually hidden in agendas and hidden in different cues. So to give you an example, some people, typically if you have a partner who is maybe the more emotionally detached partner, they will often say, I don't understand, I'm not appreciated, I go to work, I bring home a good paycheck, I mow the lawn, I take care of all of these things. How come my partner doesn't see how much I love them? And you have an emotionally attached, more of an emotionally centered partner who, for them, they want emotional attunement. They want somebody to hear and feel everything they're saying, right? And so it's really important to learn, and this is the tough part, it goes both ways. I need to learn how to teach my partner that I'm asking them for connection. I'm asking them for bonding, and it might be from me, it might be me saying, hey, if you love me, you would pick the weeds for me, right? Like, and it sounds really silly, except that that's kind of how we work as people. We have certain things that to us are really important. I mean, I've seen couples fight about, whether or not a doctor's phone number is kept on a phone, it's interesting how we pick certain things, and to us, that thing is a sign of love. That thing is a sign of attachment, when it's not necessarily universal. We each have different things or agendas or desires that to us demonstrate love. Something silly, my wife occasionally, she knows that I love candy, and I think I've talked about that before. And at the same time, I don't expect her to buy me candy, right? If I want to buy candy, I can buy candy, but occasionally I'll find a little treat. I'm like, yes, she loves me, right? And if I bought her candy, I don't know that she'd just be like, cool, you bought me candy, like, right? So we all have these different things. Because for me, I'm like, touch me. I want touch. I love touch. So we have to start learning, what is it that we need? How do I communicate that and ask my partner for it? How do I also learn about what communicates love to my partner? And how can I hear what their needs are? So I wanted to jump into that a little bit and figure out what questions we have. Obviously, we can go anywhere, so you guys start asking questions. But I thought I'd open it up with learning to understand and know what it is that communicates love to us. Obviously, when there's safety in a relationship, sexual intimacy can also be an excellent tool for communicating love and connection. But obviously, safety is pretty important.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, ask questions, use the Q&A feature. You can also use the chat feature. I forgot to mention this earlier. Q&A feature is the best. So Matt, when you gave the example of, if you loved me, you'd weed the yard. And I heard that as a child fairly often from my mother. If you loved me, you would, and weeding the garden was one of them, and the flower beds. And it always felt manipulative.
Sure, totally.
I mean, how does one receive that? I mean, and then let's take it out of, me being a child with the mother and put it into an actual, adult.
I love that you kind of called me on that, because I don't know that I was necessarily saying, here's how we should approach it. I think that's more of me trying to say, this is what we end up saying to people.
Right.
But if you really cared about me, you would know that washing my car, right? Like we have these ideas, and sometimes those ideas are born in what we received or didn't receive as a kid that we always needed and wanted. And so then we kind of think, well, this must be universal, and everyone should know that this is how you communicate love. And so then we kind of project that onto our partner, but not in a way that usually makes sense to our partner. Right? Like I literally grew up with this and became an adult with this idea that love is maybe physical affection, right? And that for a lot of people isn't the case, which is, it's just fine. So learning how to communicate that, you're right. I don't recommend going to our partner and saying, if you loved me, weed the garden, right? Because there's a lot going on there. One, we're kind of telling the other person this, it almost maybe it was an ultimatum to you as a kid. Like the only way I can show my mom that I love her was weed the garden. But what if I've got other things going on, or to me, maybe I don't even know how to weed the garden well. And then I get criticized for it. So,
which would happen. My mother was and it remains a very, very, very narcissistic person. So it was, it was what it was. But yeah, your point with the candy example is we all have little things that make us tick, and we really like it if our partner picks up on that and does that once in a while. I know that there are certain things that make me the opposite of tick, like people who don't show up on time. I feel like, well, obviously you don't care about me and it goes back to my childhood.
Totally.
With a narcissistic mother, I was never on time because whatever I was doing wasn't very important.
And it's so interesting that you say that, because I had a situation one time with a client where, and I am not the most, from a therapist standpoint, I'm not the most timely. I always tell my clients, like, you're going to get your time, but if I'm deep in emotions with somebody, then it's hard for me, and this is just my skill set or lack of it. It's hard for me to wrap it up real quick and walk them out the door. Right. And so I remember one time somebody came in and they were like, and it was probably towards the end of my day. And so I kind of get a little behind as I go, if that makes sense. And they came in and were like, you know what? You're rude. And I was like, what the hell? And I could have like taken it personal. I could have, right? Like I could have like gotten caught up in, well, if you had any idea what I was dealing with the last session or and all of that could actually be true. But in that moment, I was able to say, tell me more about why me being late feels so rude to you. And I was able to draw the client out and hear, ultimately, like you said, this childhood place that for some reason you learn this message that if somebody cares about me, they'll be on time. And if you and I were hanging out outside of here in life, you would be like, Matt really doesn't like me, which just wouldn't be the case at all. Because I just don't, here I don't see the world from that perspective. And so you have this agenda that says on time equals Matt's loving me.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that, I think so many partners just, as you said, assume the other one knows, and they don't. It never gets communicated. And
yeah, it's so hard because when we were trained to believe something, and keep in mind, it's not like we were intentionally trained to believe something. I mean, maybe sometimes we were, but for the most part, we have to make judgments as kids, as adults. We have to make judgments about people, about circumstances. And it's actually critical to our survival. So we create a judgment in our head as a kid that says, people who are on time care about me. We've done that to survive in life and to try and figure out who's safe and who isn't. We get to be an adult, and that may start to become an unhealthy core belief we've created. But you created it. I've created all of my core beliefs, and I've learned that, and now I have to judge the whole world by that in order to survive. And so one of the cool things about becoming an adult is we start to become aware of, wait a second, maybe the whole world doesn't believe this. And it's a process.
Yeah, I mean, I had to learn the on-time thing the way your client did, which is, you obviously don't care about me. Well, yes, I do. Why do you say that? Well, yeah. Let me tell you. So ask us questions in the Q&A feature. We have one here in the queue, but I want to ask you one more question, Matt. It's kind of related to this. If I have something that if you love me, you would do it for me, how do I communicate that to you without saying, if you love me, you would bring me candy?
Yeah, like this ultimatum, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is tapping into a more vulnerable or emotional side of ourselves, to be able to come to you, for instance, and say, to have a certain accountability perhaps, but to be able to come to you. And I'm trying to think of a quick example, like if I were to come to you and say, hey Scott, like I really I'm starting to realize some of the things that really communicate love to me. And I realize that I have placed a lot of emphasis on being on time. And I know it might be difficult with your schedule. I know, right? I'm honoring that to you it may not be this way, but then I might come and say, hey, would it be possible for you to be aware of my need for you to be on time? And if you could be on time, that would be fantastic. And if you couldn't, could you just send me a text letting me know you're going to be late? Or can you just give me a heads up that, earlier in the day that you're running late and you're probably going to be, what I really want is to know that you're thinking about me. And so I'm going to bring this to you with my vulnerable space and share with you its value and importance to me and all the ownership and accountability that I have around it. And then I'm going to talk to you and say, what do you think about this? Is that something you think might be possible? Can we try this together? What are your thoughts, Scott, as I walk through that?
No, I like that. That's actually pretty much what I do with the on-time thing. I just ask people, I'm like, look, if you're going to be more than 5 minutes late, please send me a text. I just need to know you haven't blown me off. I just need, and what I really want to know is you understand this is important to me and we're supposed to be meeting here at this time and you're trying. And, and I'm good with that. I'll wait. But if you don't send me that text, I'm going to be gone. I'm going to go do something else, because even now, yeah. So, okay, we've got some questions. Enough about my childhood. Let's see. I come from an extremely narcissistic, abusive family, and I have no contact with them. My partner treated me very narcissistically and abusively for years. It's familiar to me. Now he's trying to be a lot softer in his heart. I feel jealous when his family calls him and he doesn't involve me with his family. Now he's trying to do that, but I feel resistance and I feel jealous because I have no family who cares about me. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's really sad. If you felt like ultimately you had to have such strong boundaries that you no longer have contact with your family, that's pretty devastating. It's interesting because you talk about that jealousy and that longing, and my push to you would be to I guess anybody in this situation is, what would it look like for you to go create your family? I know that may sound it may sound a little funny the way I'm saying that, but ultimately, and especially in the society that we're in, I think it's really important for us to figure out who is my family, who can I create as my new family, who can I start to have familial traditions with. And I think there's a lot of people in the world who really crave connection and crave family social support. Sometimes that can be found in a church environment. You can also find the drama that you find in family in a church environment as well. Uh, but or finding other people with similar or like backgrounds or habits, or hobbies, I think is what I meant more than habits. But so my push is, yes, I would honor when his family calls, I would honor that jealousy, if you will. I would honor that longing, because that is something inside of you that craves for connection. The part about you feeling resistance, if your partner has, I mean, it makes me wonder if your partner has been that abusive for that long. I would wonder for myself, is that resistance me not wanting to get close to his family in case I lose him and his family? So lots of different ideas there, but I would say that really sounds to me like you have this inner longing, and it's showing you what your needs are. I would honor those needs in healthy ways and try and find ways to get those attachment needs, and even open up and express those attachment needs to others. If you can find a motherly figure or a fatherly figure and keep that in a very healthy relationship, you can often find people who want to fulfill that mentor role. It takes work, and you're going to have to risk rejection. That's the scary part about asking. But I actually think that your question and comment here is a beautiful showing of how in tune you are with your wounds and your needs. And I would do my best to try and find healthy ways to honor those.
Yeah, Matt, I love what you said about also, family is more than just blood relatives or marriage relatives. I know, I mean, I'm a gay man, so I know so many people who are separate, just don't have any communication with their blood family, but they've created their own family. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I have sort of my blood family that I'm very close to, and my, sort of created family.
Absolutely.
I had to work hard on the created family.
It takes a lot of effort. And here's the hard part is that the truth is, and I wonder if you've seen this in your circles, when you have somebody who also needs family, they're afraid of rejection too. They've got wounds that they're working through. And so you kind of get, the word I want to use is this group of people who have their own longings and hurts, and almost like this group of misfits who are trying to, and I'm not trying to be shaming when I say that.
Right. No, it's the island of misfit toys sometimes, but in a really good way.
Well, no, and that's what becomes fantastic, because if you work on those attachment bonds and you take them nice and slow, you can create some beautiful foundational attachments that will last your whole life. And there are times where you end up bonding with people who have similar trauma. And what I've found is that I do find some of that bonding occurring, but I've actually found that when I have bonding with people who have similar trauma, it's usually because they've done healing work like I have. So we're not creating this common enemy intimacy. We're bonding over the fact that we both have found healing to our wounds.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But there are other ways to do it. I have one of my good friends. He's gay, and his family was and remains very conservatively religious, and they just dumped him when he came out. Tried to get him to go to the gay conversion and all that kind of stuff, which he just didn't happen. So, and he was very depressed, and he finally went into therapy, and the therapist walked him through. What do you want from a family? And the list, and today he has a partner and a son and a business where he's got 50 or 60 employees. He knows everything about every single person in that business. If somebody's sick, he calls them and says, hey, how can I help? You know, he treats them like family and they treat him like family back, and nobody ever quits working for them, you know, because they love working there. And, you know, he treats them like he really cares about them, because he does. He's found ways to create his family. And, you know, and the depression that he was fighting is gone because he has the family that he needs, even though it doesn't involve his parents. You know?
Yeah, and I actually I have found that there's certain people who have come into my life kind of by accident. Like, in fact, several people who I truly would consider family are people who were working for me when I owned a different business, just like you're talking about your friend. And some of those people have become family, and some of those people I've never seen them after they transitioned to another career. And so it's interesting if we really look around how we can start to pick up family if we start to look and explore that family just is non-traditional at times.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to this next one. When you communicate that action shows me you pay attention. When it happens, I show an action in life. Okay, so if my partner, I think this is what this question is asking. If my partner does something, he brings me candy, and I say, wow, thank you so much for bringing me the candy. I love that you do this. You know, it makes me happy. And then it never happens again.
Right. So that's a great question. And to be honest, I would lean into the part where I would say, hey, I remember when you did this and it made me feel really loved, and I tried to express that to you, and I have a lot of confusion. I would approach the partner. I have confusion because my assumption would be that you heard my voice and that you knew that was very impactful for me. And so can you help me understand why that behavior doesn't continue? So you're trying to pull out the vulnerability, if your partner can go there, to figure out what's the block. Now, obviously doing therapy work with the clients over the years, there's lots of reasons that could be. Some people are embarrassed. Some people, don't want the attention. Like, you're trying to express gratitude and they feel like you're giving them too much attention and they're not sure how to respond to all of your emotion. But I would try and explore with that person what's going on that prevents that from happening. And honestly, their answer may be great. Their answer may be terrible. Well, I don't know. I just don't think about it, which is going to hurt, because then you're going to feel like you don't think about me. And I would go even further. Well, why? What is it that you think about? Right? So if you're not remembering that that's valuable and important to me, I'm curious, what do you feel like you remember to show me you love me? And that's where you might get, well, I mow the lawn every Friday morning, and I know how important a good looking lawn is to you. And you're going, huh, okay. So let's have more conversation around this.
I like that. Okay, I'm going to jump into our chat feature here. This is a long one, but my love language is acts of services, helping to take out the trash, scheduling family vacations, etc. I agree that I even catch myself feeling like I'm being manipulative to get my partner to do what I want him to do. At the point in my relationship where I am now, my husband not only doesn't take care of my love language, but refuses to take care of himself. He won't schedule his own dentist appointment. He doesn't get to work on time, things like that. I understand that he has depression and that's related to it, but my love language, my love glass is always an empty. His love language is consistent touch and empathy, which also feels manipulative, since it feels to me that it's perpetuating bad behavior and allowing him to feel justified in his self-pity. How do we bridge the gap when neither of our needs are being met? Very interesting question.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, if it's tough, right? Because if there is um, a serious depression issue going on, I mean, you're fighting brain chemicals, and obviously, I would recommend in a situation like that that somebody consult with a psychiatrist and discuss, um, potentially medication if that would be helpful. Obviously, a good psychiatrist also typically recommends a good therapist so that you're simultaneously working on potential chemistry issues as well as behavioral issues. Um, and you talk about him not taking care of himself. The sad part is we've talked previously in webinars that it almost sounds like you're taking the mothering role. And yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm making sure I'm reading that right. And it's not even a mothering role, like, because you're certainly that idea probably sounds disgusting to you. And what I mean more is the mentor role, that if I don't take control, I can't pull him. I'm trying to pull him into a peer role. But the more I try to take control out of fear, right? Because if my spouse isn't getting up for work, and that is really important to our economic situation in our home, right? In that moment, I don't care how motherly I have to be, I'm going to get you out of bed and get you to work so that we can survive another day. And so you're dealing with, it sounds like, several facets here of, obviously, if you truly have like a depression issue, highly recommend, and sadly you might unfortunately need to make that appointment, right? Like, it sounds like that's what's happening. I would actually try to approach your husband. I would talk to him and say, hey, I don't want to take this role. I want to have a peer-to-peer relationship. The sad part is if he likes affection and empathy, which is wonderful, he would be amazed at how much affection and empathy he would get from you if he knew how to fill up your bucket. The tough part is he's probably so hopeless, feeling like nothing he does even matters, that to try and get him to act in that area feels nearly impossible. So, if that's kind of my push, is I would have like a heart-to-heart conversation and say, hey, I want to be in a peer-to-peer role with you, not a mentor-mentee. I want you and I to both meet each other's needs more fully. I imagine you've had these conversations. I would just push that back and say, my hope is, let's make some decisions together. What are your thoughts on this? Try and get as much input and action collaboratively, rather than making decisions and forcing him into it. Yes, unfortunately, there's times where I've encouraged clients, push into inpatient treatment if that's really what's necessary, because there needs to be an intervention that will help this client level out and get the care that they need. But I would consult with your therapist on probably maybe more specifics on that.
Yeah, this is the dilemma that loved ones of addicts and people with a mental illness or psychological disorder run into all the time.
Oh yeah.
Is how much do I do? How much do I give? And codependency, this is the reason Dr. Rupp came up with codependency. Codependency would blame you and shame you and tell you you're overstepping, and because you're loving and caring for someone who may not be at this moment in time able to care for himself. But then again, he may be. And Prodependence is like, great, you're caring for this person, you love him, wonderful. Let's find a way to do it better. Let's figure out what he can take on. Let's set some boundaries. Let's get him the help he needs so he can grow up and hold up his end of the deal. And that's what Prodependence is all about. It removes all of the telling you you're doing something wrong, but it does recognize that you're worn out. Your glass is empty right now, and you need some help. And you need to figure out a way to be more effective without draining. You need to be able to care for yourself while also caring for him.
Right. Yeah, I love that you're jumping in there on that, because the reality of it is there's only so much we can do for a loved one. And if we aren't figuring out ways to fill our bucket while we're waiting for them to show up and help fill our bucket, then we're going to get depleted and be in a terrible place. So I love it. Scott's absolutely right. Really focus in on learning healthy ways to take care of yourself so that he's not constantly draining your emotional state.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that you're here getting some support. I mean, it's a real step in the right direction. So let's jump into our next question here. This is kind of a related question to that. How much is healthy to sacrifice in a relationship in terms of space, time, energy, etc.? I know for everybody it's different, but in general, so how much do you give?
That is a really interesting question, because I don't know that it's quantifiable, right?
I think it's like alcoholism. How much booze do I have to drink to be an alcoholic? It's more a matter of what's it doing to your life, Does that sound right?
Yeah, I hear that question, and to be honest, it's really intriguing to me what I've seen, where one client, for instance, or one person can basically accept and love their spouse where they're at, and they have hope that their spouse will come around one day, while they stay solid in their recovery work. And they're like, hey, I can ride this out forever, and if they pass away before getting healthy, I'm fine. And I'm right. Like, part of me is like, wow, bless you. Like, that's amazing. And I have other people who say, I can't do it. I'm done. I'm moving on. And so it's like, when you say, how much do you sacrifice? This is not a definite answer, but as much as you feel you can, in order to feel like you've given everything you know how, and then but not so much that you break. And what I mean by break is that you go into a really unhealthy place. But if you break in the sense of, I've given everything I know how, and now I feel at peace moving on in my life, right? Okay, great. If you feel at peace moving on, or you feel at peace staying in the current situation, give as much as you can until you feel at peace, knowing that you've given everything you know how, and it hasn't injured you. And I don't mean it hasn't hurt. I don't mean that it hasn't caused you pain or been very difficult. Injured you as in your thinking is so impaired that you're not gonna make it. I hope that makes sense.
I think it totally does. And as this questioner points out in the question, everybody is different. I think about my sister versus me. My sister is a natural born caregiver. She draws energy from it. She derives joy from it. She loves doing it. She could do it nonstop, 24/7, every moment, the rest of her life, and be really, really happy doing it. I love being of service, but I run out of energy, and it gives me joy, but I run out of energy. I just can't do it the way my sister can do it, and all power to her, but, I would have to give up way before she would.
Yeah.
So,
and we all have different emotional tolerances, and we all have different traumas and healing. And we're I think all going to have our own gifts in that as well. And so if you're able to see that and know yourself well enough, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Next one here. This one's more of a comment, but I think it's worth sharing here. My husband's a porn addict. He hasn't watched for about a year, but he's like a dry drunk. He's very narcissistic. At one point, I was showing my husband love languages. I'd let him know. They were working on love language. I let him know I like to have acknowledgement of my existence, words of affirmation, intellectual conversations, or any conversation. He told me his love language is sexual touch. Not cuddling, just sexual touch. Not mutual sexual touch, just him getting touched. Long story short, I tried and he didn't, so I stopped. Then he got mad that I stopped. Thoughts?
Cool.
That's a tough one.
Well, I chuckle, I go, huh, because I can imagine the amount of hope that you had in just having the conversation and thinking maybe if I give, I will also be given to. It's interesting because if somebody says my love language is sexual touch, that would tell me how out of touch they are with understanding their love language, right? Like, so essentially your love language of touch became so sexualized that that's the only way you know how to feel or experience love. And then in addition to that, we got some work to do to try and separate that out and understand what love actually looks like and feels like. And likely that's not his only one. I'm not exactly sure that it works that way. But then for you to engage and try to give to him, likely, if that were me, it would be like, great, we've got this idea, we've had this talk, and then to not receive, that's going to feel like a depletion or a rejection. You may need to approach him. I know in some cases, you talk about him being narcissistic. It might be where you approach him in a more pragmatic, like if that's the way his brain thinks, it's like, hey, here's what I need from you, and here's what I can give in return. It's almost like a transactional experience. And there are some people that's the way their brain works. I'll get this if I give you that. But it has to be clearly defined and very well talked about. You might try having a conversation and seeing if that helps. For somebody who's a romantic and highly emotional, that may feel like it's manipulation, but really it's us having a conversation as two adults. What do we need to coexist here and to help each other? And I could appreciate that would be really hard for me to make a relationship transactional. But there are people that's the way their brain functions. And no matter how much you try and explain, no matter how much emotion you share, it is transactional. And if you're willing to give without him, in this case, receive, this is a great transaction. Why would I change it? And so you might explore that and see if that's really the way his brain functions. And if it is, can you make that work? If it is the way it functions and you are able to make it work, you might find that your relationship can work. That may not be the most popular response I ever give, but I want, at least to consider.
I totally get it. I'm a very logical, straightforward person. I think just like that, I don't know if I'm a narcissist or not. I think I can tend in that direction, but I totally understand that. If somebody came to me that way, I would get it. I would. So maybe.
And there's probably a scale or a spectrum there, right? Like people who are far more maybe on the emotional side of, far away from transactional as possible. And then you get people as you move that, it's a transaction, and then all the way to that's just the way life works. So I imagine we're all on the scale somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to pop down a question here. I'm very attached to my partner, and he's not as attached in return. I do not have motivation or energy to do anything except obsess about my partner. What should I do?
Ooh. So there is I'll throw this out there. There's a book that I really enjoy. It's called Attached. I think the Adult Science of Attachment. The author, I believe, is Amir, A-M-I-R, Levine. Amir Levine. I think there's several authors, but that's like the one that comes to my mind. And in that book, it talks about attachment styles. And sometimes when we learn, but it talks about it from an adult perspective, which is one thing I love, because as we become adults, it gives us a perspective to realize, wait, I may struggle with an anxious attachment. Now, an anxious attachment might be more prone to obsessing about my partner, because if my partner feels like I'm okay, then, but feels like I'm okay in the way that I want to be loved, if they acknowledge me, then I can calm, and then I can regulate, and I don't need to obsess so much. So, you talk about being very attached, and my push here for anyone is to consider, are we anxiously attached instead of striving for a secure attachment? Now, if your partner could have a secure attachment, right? I know nothing about you or your partner, but your partner could have a secure attachment, but your anxious attachment is so high that they are letting you work through that, and you're maybe upset or hurt or angry because they're not showing up for you in the way that you want them to. So I think it's important to try and explore, is my attachment healthy? And therefore, is my expectation of my partner and their attachment healthy? I might be trying to judge my partner's ability to attach based on my perhaps unhealthy level. Now, again, I know nothing about you or your partner, because you've only given me that much information, but it's something that I had to learn a lot about and understand for myself around attachment.
Have we talked about attachment styles in this?
I thought we had, because I actually...
So too, maybe there might be an older one, but it might be time to revisit.
Yeah, I mean, I can go find it right now and share it on the screen, or maybe I can bring it back again next week.
Maybe next week or something, yeah. The next question is related. I have anxious attachment, and my husband has avoidant attachment. How can I know if he loves me?
So that is a great question. That it's funny. I give pause, because if you go back to kind of what I was trying to say in the beginning, as I was doing a little bit of a teaching piece, one of the things I think is really important is that we start to know and understand our partner, to find their hidden attachment cues. I know that, like, as we start to understand ourselves better, we start to understand our partner better, we can really start to look and find value in their cue. So, hey, again, going back to that silly mowing the lawn or weeding the garden, like, hey, you did that, and I know that that's one way you love me, and so thank you so much for loving me. Now, all the while, it doesn't mean I'm going to not discuss and get vulnerable about my need for love and attachment to occur, but I'm also going to honor my partner for when I know they are showing up and showing love. So it takes a little bit of a stretch on our part, because if I feel like I'm wounded or not getting enough of what I need, it's hard to go affirm somebody for showing love in a way that isn't what I need, or doesn't traditionally show up in the way that I need. But I am affirming to my partner that I know that they love me, and I'm glad that they are showing me in the ways they know how, and trying to open up some of that dialogue. So I hope that gives some clarity or some help.
Yeah, and anxious people can attach very well with avoidant people. There's a chapter, I think it's in Prodependence, where Dr. Robbie's talking emotionally, not looks, but he says, twos don't marry tens. What he means by that is, if I'm emotionally damaged and you're emotionally damaged, our emotional damage might fit pretty well together. There's probably going to be some shortcomings where it doesn't fit, and you're searching for his love language, it sounds like, but that doesn't mean he doesn't love you and you don't love him, and that you guys don't mostly work together. So it's just a matter of finding a way, as Matt said, to get under the surface and see what's really there.
Yeah, just please don't take shame when you hear twos don't marry tens. That in no way.
Not how it's meant.
Yeah, I've had people at times tell me, like, that is so painful, and it's not ultimately trying to say, like, oh, you deserve this, because your work's not done. It's just this concept that a lot of times we're not, like, maybe because of my own history, I didn't even know what I was looking for. I didn't know what to look for as danger signs. But in no way is that like my fault that I married somebody who is betraying me or hurting me.
Yeah, I think Dr. Robb's point is Matt's point there. It's, and the example he uses is a guy who he's had this string of highly dramatic relationships, and he just decides it's too much drama, and then he starts dating someone who's very stable and really nice, and everybody thinks this woman is perfect, and he's bored shitless because he needs the drama. That's part of who he is, and and that doesn't mean he's an emotional 2 or an emotional 10 or an 8 or a 5 or whatever. It just means he needs drama, and that's the kind of point that whole analogy of Rob's is making is, you got to find what works for you, and you may like an avoidant person on some level, or maybe not. I don't know. I'm assuming a lot there.
Oh, sure, but no, I think it's good.
Yeah, and I may be way off base too. I can tell Matt's looking at me like, dude, shut
up. You've got good commentary.
Okay, I'm going to back up to a couple of questions here. My husband and I have split, but with the intention of having some space and that I can recover. I believe this questionnaire is dealing with bipolar disorder, from what I remember from previous weeks. But now we're not interacting in any kind of sentimental way. He's emotionally unavailable, and he won't say if he wants to be with me again or not. I'm unsure if I should try and talk with him or just do no contact. He does not want to do therapy. Thoughts?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So let's see. He is emotionally unavailable. So in a situation like this, I think oftentimes we have to look and go, well, how long can I wait to let this person figure out what direction they're going to go? How long? And maybe in this case, it's, well, I have to wait. He's telling me not to contact. I guess I'm not quite sure there, but I think
it feels like a little bit of like almost a therapeutic separation, but without any boundaries attached to it.
Right. So at that point, we just call that a separation. It's not therapeutic, right? Because, a therapeutic separation is we're seeking to achieve goals and objectives together. And so, I think not knowing all the intricacies of this one, I might try and approach my partner and say, I do want to have a talk. I do want to start setting some goals or some things that we could try and do together. Are you open to discussing some things so that we can slowly reinitiate contact? And I think I would probably put it out there just a little bit at a time, just to try and see, like, hey, okay, you need me to back off. Well, and I might say, okay, well, I'll contact you in a week and see where you're at. Like, I'll set some kind of parameter there that says, I'm going to try. And then if I keep getting, again, how long can you be rejected for? How long can you live in that situation, and you feel like you've done everything you know how. Now, he may not want to do therapy. Highly encourage you to find a therapist who can help you, because that sounds painful and lonely. So, yeah, I would encourage you to take care of yourself for sure while you're waiting for your partner to show up. I hope that answered that.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, everybody's here. Again, congratulations to everybody for being here because you're seeking help for yourself. But yeah, a lot of times more than just an online webinar is needed, and it could be a therapist in your area. So this will probably be our last question. I'm going to skip down to this one at the end. How do you know when your attachment wounds are healed, and how long does this work take in general? An American psychotherapist, sorry, I thought I read that as psychopath. An American psychotherapist is saying you have to be alone and not in relationship to do this work. Is there truth in that? So,
I mean, I don't know, because I don't know. Boy, that's interesting. I don't know that I would ever tell somebody that they have to be alone in order to heal from attachment wounds. That be,
I think Stan it's either Stan Tatkin or Sue Johnson says, I think it's Stan. You know, the problem with attachment wounds is the way to heal them is to create healthy attachment.
right. Like everything inside of me is kind of going, well, that's really intriguing that somebody is saying that. You know, I don't want to dismiss it right out, but I know that I wouldn't necessarily suggest that, right? So let me jump back on how long does it take. So, well, how do you know when they're healed? You know, healed is kind of a interesting phrase, right? I've done a ton of healing in my life. I know a lot of other good people have done a ton of healing, and it would be, I think, very unwise or unhealthy to say that those wounds for me still, they get hit. I almost consider that healing comes that I'm not using unhealthy coping mechanisms to try and soothe those wounds anymore. Or I've learned how to communicate when those wounds are getting hit, and I'm learning to reach out to other people. But again, it's just I'm doing healthy behaviors when my wounds are coming up. So I would say to somebody, if you are consistently, it doesn't mean I don't struggle once in a while with an unhealthy behavior, but if you're consistently going to healthy behavior and doing healthy methods, typically learned in therapy and reading and everything else, when your attachment wounds come up, I would say, hey, you've done a lot of healing work. You're in a good place, right? Now, having friends around me who can call me out and encourage me to look at things and go, hey, are you sure you don't need to do a little work here because your behavior is making me uncomfortable or nervous for you? So having a good support system around me who's not afraid to call me out is really good. But to me, I think there's lots of healing that's done, but to ever say that they are healed, well, scar tissue can heal, but it still hurts at times, or it's still numb occasionally, right? So I hope that answers that a little bit. How long does it take? Great question. I know you're saying in general, right? I think it depends on how deep the wound is. And I think at times I've seen myself and others where I've, for the most part, healed a wound and I'm aware of the scar tissue. And yet every once in a while I'm like, oh, there's a small section of that wound that I didn't realize was there. And so but true healing is I know what to do with it when it comes up. I don't go back to my unhealthy habits or behaviors or whatever else. So how long does it take? I mean, I think it depends on how much resiliency we've had, how much therapy we have, what our support system looks like, what our routines and daily habits look like. I've seen people do some pretty tremendous healing in a few months. on some wounds, and some wounds can take a few years. I know with my clients, I try and tell them specifically, my goal is not to have you finish therapy when all of these wounds are healed. My goal is to have you finish therapy when you've got enough tools in your tool belt that when these wounds come up, you know what to do with them. And you don't need me or another therapist or a group, because you have a good sense about you and you're doing the work. To me, that's healing. It's not all the work being done. It's that you have the skill set to know how to handle it. And I think I answered the last question already. So
Yeah.
on that one.
Yeah, I think you're totally spot on with that. You know, I don't think my attachment wounds are ever completely healed. There's always that scar tissue, and sometimes there's another layer of the onion to peel, you know, that'll come up, and those scars inevitably get poked. And as Matt said, it's either numb or it hurts. Now, do I know what to do with that? Do I know what's happening and how to deal with it? Then if I do, then I've done a lot of work, and you know, but I don't know that that means it's healed. And yeah, I'll just have to be alone to heal attachment wounds. That makes no sense to me.
No, I think we can do a lot of work. Like, I realized, I think there was a place where in my own recovery and in helping other people, we don't want to feel like we have to have a certain person in order to heal a specific wound. I think sometimes people will come to me and be like, I've got this wound around rejection, and it's from my father, and I have no contact, or they've passed away. And I think this idea of like, I need a specific person, or if my spouse would only figure this out, then I could finally heal this wound. I don't think that is healthy, but this realization that I can use lots of people in various capacities, and we are social beings, social creatures. I think it's really important to have a really good social support system. So yeah, can I find healing? Do I need to find the healing within myself? Yes. Can I use people to help me do that? Absolutely. So maybe that's the direction that psychotherapist was taking, was that we ultimately need to find the healing within ourselves, that it's not going to be found in this other perfect person showing up.
Yeah, thank you for verbalizing that. I think, you know, I go back to my own history, and you know, I didn't trust anybody when I got into therapy and recovery, and I had to very slowly learn how to be vulnerable with safe, empathetic people in very tiny baby steps. And it started with my therapist, and then it was a sponsor, and then it was a friend in the program with me. And you know, it took a long time for me to be able to really fully open up to anybody, including my therapist. I mean, he got it in like little tiny bits and pieces for a good year. Because, you know, but I had to slowly heal a tiny bit at a time, and learn that it was okay to be vulnerable, and that people actually would be safe with me and empathetic and meet my needs, that was possible. Yeah. Because I didn't know it was possible until I started healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But my point is, I still needed other people to teach me that it's possible. I just needed different people than the ones that I'd had before.
Yep. Healing so often is found within ourselves, and oftentimes we need other people to help us find that, but the real healing happens in here, not because of them.
And then, you know, I just want to bring this up and get your thought on this, Matt, before we log off here, because we're already over. But it is possible, in my experience, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, to then go back to the people who created the attachment wounds and heal with them and have a real connected, intimate relationship with them.
Yes, it can be, right? Sometimes we are able to accept that their limitations for connection are very short or very small, but we can still have some connection. Sometimes we go back, and when we've done our healing and we're able to get on a certain level with them, they're able to show or come forward in a certain way. So I always encourage people, don't write people off, but you also have to know that if you go back and try to have a deep emotional connection with the person who potentially created the wound, you have to be secure enough that they might stab at that wound again. But if you've done your work, you can deflect that and come to acceptance and say, you know what, I'm not going to let you hurt me, that way. And I'm okay. And I've done my due diligence. So does that help at all?
Yeah, I'll go back to my own story again. I have repaired the relationship with my parents significantly. It's never going to be the relationship that I might want to have, but I've accepted their limitations. I've accepted my limitations, and we've found a way to coexist and genuinely express love to one another. We've found a love language that works for us.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a wonderful thing. So
lots of peace there when we're able to do that. It takes a lot of work. It shows how much recovery you've done.
still in progress.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I love when we have tons of questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to everything. And I skipped that last one because it was so good. But there was a bunch of other stuff. So save it for next week or 2 weeks from now, and we'll be back. Anything you want to say to take us out, Matt?
No, you guys keep it up. You're doing great. And please come back, keep asking questions. I really enjoyed it. So we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.